Are you brand new to sewing and trying to figure out how to read a pattern? Then this video is for you. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. Welcome to the world of sewing and particularly heirloom sewing. This video is a part of my beginner's heirloom series, so I just welcome you to it. So how to read a pattern? Well, I've grabbed one out of my stash. This is a Vogue. I figured we would just go Vogue today, go a little fancy. And we're just going to kind of go through the pattern as somebody who's never seen a pattern before, and I'm just going to tell you overall how to read one. I've been reading patterns for 15, maybe 20 years. How old am I now? Anywho, so every pattern's a little bit different, but generally speaking, you're going to see the pattern, and for the front cover, you'll see the garment on it. If there's any different views, you'll see that sometimes. Like I said, everyone's a little bit different, but generally you'll have that. If there are, though, any views, they will, I'm going to say always, be on the back, and they'll have like A, B, C, D, whatever, or view 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'll have more of an outline instead of it being a color picture. It'll be more of an outline of the shape, so you could really get an idea of what's going on with that garment and what the cut looks like. And then, in addition to that, they generally speaking will have a description on the back of it. So they'll just talk about if it's loose fitting, if it's form fitting, if the bust is this or that, or if the waist is empire waist or drop waist, whatever. They'll describe it in words, and then they'll talk about notions that you need. And sometimes they do this in paragraph form, and sometimes they just kind of do this in list form. Notions being things like zippers and buttons and thread and interfacing, anything besides the fabric really that you would need to, well, fabric and like your typical sewing supplies, so your scissors and pins and stuff will not be listed, but if you need ribbon or lace, it'll tell you all of that. And then below that, you'll generally have a list of recommended fabrics. Now, these are really recommended fabrics. Don't let them limit you. However, if you pick a fabric that's not on the list, you kind of need to know what you're doing, because you could get yourself into a hot mess in a hurry. So the fabric recommendations are really great for beginners, because it's basically telling you these are the fabrics that will work and you won't get yourself into a hot mess in a hurry. Then you get down to having a chart. They always have a chart. I'm going to say always and kind of cringe, because I'm sure there's some pattern out there somewhere without a chart. But all the ones that I've seen, all the four main, the Vogue, Simplicity, McCall's, Butterwick, and then a bunch of the heirloom smaller lines, they all have a chart. So they're going to have the sizes on top, and then the fabric. Well, sometimes sometimes that's reversed, but they will have one axis with the sizes, and the other with the amount of fabric that you need. And the amount of fabric, it can be broken down into two. This is what I love, especially about children, sewing for children, is that there's a huge difference between 45-inch wide fabric and 60-inch wide fabric. And you may think, particularly as a beginner, that those 15 inches won't make that big of a difference, but my goodness. Particularly in the land of children's clothing, you can get so much more bang for your buck for a 60-inch wide fabric than a 45-inch wide fabric. You can also get a much fuller skirt without having to piece together so many pieces of fabric, which is lovely. Sometimes you can just get away with just using one panel if you're doing a small enough garment. One selvage edge to the other of 60-inch wide, and that is your whole continuous skirt. It makes my heart sing not having those side seams. I don't know what it is about eliminating the side seams, but I am just like giddy happy over it. So, anywho, it'll tell you for 45-inch wide and for 60-inch wide, and those are very common widths for fabric. You'll see when you go shopping online or in person, whatever, shopping for fabric, you'll see that you'll have 44, 45-inch wide fabric is very common. 56 is also a little bit common. 60-inch wide, like 58 to 60-inch wide, is very common. And if you have a 58-inch wide fabric, that's basically 60 inches. That pattern is going to work. So don't fret over those 2 inches being gone. And then sometimes you'll have contrasting fabric for a pattern, and it will tell you this, like for this particular pattern, it's got a contrasting fabric for the collar bands and end ties, or tie ends if I can read. And so it'll tell you that. And it will kind of allow you to design the dress how you want to design it. So let's pull a pattern piece out, shall we? Okay, so some patterns are nested and some are not. And what that means is that if it's nested, it's not so much fun to work with, because if you want to keep all of those sizes intact to be able to use for future use, I mean, you can't use it in the past, so let's say future use, um, then you have to trace your pattern, which kind of sucks. You can get tracing paper off the Amazon. It's fairly cheap. You can just search for medical tracing or medical paper, and it'll pop up. It's like the same paper that you would, on the exam table they roll out for you. Roll out the red carpet, roll out the medical paper. So it's the same sort of thing like that, and you can just put it on top and trace it out. It kind of sucks. And when I get a pattern that's not nested, I'm like, thank you for valuing my time, because that's how I feel, that I don't have to trace the thing and then have to store all the stuff, and it's just one less thing to do. So anyway, so this one happens to be nested. Most of actually all of like the main ones, the McCall's, Butterwick, Vogue, Simplicity, all of those guys will nest their patterns, and it's a cost savings for them. I mean, I get it. I've been producing patterns. I get it. Anywho, so one of the things you'll see a number on it, and that will correspond to what the pattern piece is. So like number 6 is the yoke for this one, yoke A and B, and then you'll see the pattern number on here, and if it doesn't have a pattern number, it'll have like the garment name or the pattern name. It'll have that instead. Then it'll have the sizes listed, and the sizes are notated by different line patterns. Okay, so like the dashes and stuff on the lines will be different in a different pattern, and that's how you know if it's size 2, 3, or 4, or whatever. I'm looking at a 2, 3, and 4 in front of me, or whatever sizes is in front of you. Now, one thing that's really important is how do you align this pattern onto your fabric? So there are two straight grains to fabric, right? You've got one straight grain that is going to be parallel with your selvage edge. That's the edge that's it's kind of been tamed by the manufacturer. That was the one that they had on the whatever pins or doodads. I'm not an expert in this, okay? So don't take this. You take this with a grain of salt. And then your cross grain is going to be the one that is parallel with the cut edge or the ripped edge, whichever one was cut off of the bolt. That's going to be the cross grain, and both of those are going to be grains that really, particularly in casual sewing, you can kind of get away with using either one of these depending on the fabric. I'll get into that. And then, one's the weave and one's the weft, if I'm saying that right. And then the bias is 45 degrees offset of any one of those. Okay, so that's what's going to give you the stretch to your fabric. So a couple of different things when it comes to fabric and laying it out. Your fabric could be happy in all directions, and if that is the case, that's going to be great for you, especially as a beginner. Because if it's happy, if the pattern is the same in the straight grain as it is in the cross grain, you just got to pick one, and especially for casual sewing, you're going to be fine, okay? We're not talking about pulling threads for wedding gowns or christening, dresses or whatever. So if it's only happy in one direction, these are fabrics with a nap, or fabrics where maybe your pattern's going to be upside down, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to have an upside down little bird, and not as happy as the bird would be right side up. So you got to pay attention to your pattern and if there's any nap to your fabric. An easy way of doing nap is just to pet the fabric and see what feels nice. I like the fabric to be petted from top to bottom. So if I was going to have a corduroy dress, I would want to pet from my shoulders down and have that feel nice. And even as a beginner, you will know what I mean when you're petting your fabric. I know it sounds kind of silly, but if you pet it the wrong direction, you'll know what I mean. Same thing with velvet, and there's a bunch of fabrics that have a nap to it. And because you can't switch the pattern piece, either on the straight grain or the cross grain, because you have to abide by that nap, you're going to likely need more fabric, and that will be notated by the back of your pattern. So when you line up your pattern piece onto your fabric, now that we know whatever way your fabric is happy, now that we've talked about that, What you're going to want to do is that you can either line it up according to the grain arrow on the pattern piece. So you would measure from, say, your selvage edge on one side of the arrow to the selvage edge like on the other side of the arrow, and make sure that they're the same dimension. That way they're pretty much parallel-ish. I mean, there's always going to be some error, and that's perfectly fine, but they're pretty much parallel to your fabric and you are good to go. The other way of lining it up is that it might say, to align on the center fold, or to align on a fold. Doesn't have to be center fold, but to align on a fold. And really what that's saying is that's saying that the pattern piece is symmetric and that you can get away with, you can have less work by just folding it, keeping it on grain, and basically that folded edge now is acting as your grain line. So it's still lining up on grain. You still need to pay attention to that. You're just kind of having to cut out, you're just getting to cut out like half as much as you need to cut out. It's saving you time and effort, which is great. I love that. So another common thing that's on pattern pieces are notations. You'll have notations for just lining things up. The triangles are really popular with the four main ones, the Vogue, Simplicity, Butterwick, McCall's. The triangles are super popular, and I used to put clip marks into all these triangles of lining up all my seams. I don't do that anymore, but you are more than welcome to do that. If you do put clip marks into those seams, make sure that you don't go past the seam allowance. So for example, if your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, you want your clip mark to be way less than 1/2 inch, say 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch. That way it's not going to creep up on that where your seam is and cause, structural integrity issues. All right. The other thing is that you might see X's, particularly on sleeves. If you have a gathered sleeve, you'll see an X on the front and back of the sleeve on where you should gather in between. And those are great. You can mark them with a removable marker, or I love to mark them with a clip mark. I will put 1 clip mark in the front of the sleeve and 2 in the back of the sleeve. That's been in my notation for years and years, and it's second nature to me now. So that's what I do for that. Now, something when it comes to heirloom sewing that it could be unique about patterns, I haven't really seen this in the 4 main patterns, I've really kind of seen this just for heirloom patterns, is that you'll have some beautiful embroidery work on these patterns. And you can just place your fabric, particularly heirloom quality fabric, you can just place right over your pattern piece and trace the embroidery work off. You don't even need a light behind it. I do have a wonderful light though from Amazon. It's like a USB powered light that I absolutely love, and that is handy. But if you are just getting into this and you don't want to purchase that, I totally get it. Heirloom, like I said, heirloom quality fabric, you can see through it for the most part, and you can just put it on top and trace that embroidery work out. You can also trace out any sort of lace motifs that might be on the fabric, lace shaping, all of that yummy goodness. If there's things that I've missed for beginners, of course, put them down in the comments below. I have tons of other videos in this whole beginner's heirloom thing that I've got going on this series, so I welcome you to it. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.